The biggest mistake he ever made wasn't cheating on his wife. It was believing she had no idea what he was doing. By the time he realized the truth, it was already far too late. Welcome back. What would you do if the person you trusted the most thinks they can take everything from you? Today's story is about a woman who stayed quiet enough for everyone to underestimate her, and that was their mistake. Now let's get into it. Ralph Coleman was the kind of guy that would walk into a room and make it his. Firm handshake, tall and easy smile. He dressed well, he talked well, until a long time ago, Julie Coleman assured herself that it was enough. They had met in Arizona at a fundraiser for a children's hospital. Julie was there out of concern for the cause. Ralph was there because he knew that rich people went to those things, and Ralph Coleman was always making the next connection. He saw her in the corner of the room, standing by the window, holding a glass of sparkling water, and got near her. 3 years later, they were married. 2 years after that, they had a daughter named Gracie. In all that haze, Julie had a business idea, but one she couldn't quite bring herself to mention. It was a specialty home goods store, high-end cookware, artisan kitchen accessories, imported linens, the kind of store that didn't exist yet in their part of Scottsdale, Arizona, where their neighbors spent serious money on their homes and would absolutely spend it in a beautiful shop 2 miles from their front door. She had done the research. She had the supplier contacts. She had the vision down to the lighting and the way the entrance would smell when you walked in. She sat Ralph down one evening and walked him through every single detail. Ralph listened. He nodded. He looked at the numbers she had printed out and he said, "Julie, this is smart. Really smart." And then he said the thing that should have been her first warning. "Put it in my name for the financing. My credit is better right now and it will be easier to get the business loan. But this is yours. You know I know that." Julie believed him. She loved him and she trusted him and she believed him. So she put it in his name. She put everything in his name. And then she got to work building the most important thing she had ever built. The store opened on a Saturday morning in March in a restored brick building on a corner that Julie had personally negotiated a 10-year lease on. She had talked the landlord down 15% on the monthly rate. She had overseen the renovation herself, choosing every fixture, every paint color, every display shelf. She had flown to Portland to meet with a ceramic supplier. She had driven to Savannah to visit an artisan who made hand-poured candles that smelled like cedar and sea salt. She called it Harper Home. Clean, elegant, the type of name you recall. Ralph came to the opening. He shook hands and smiled and told people it was his store, and they all said, "Ralph, you have a real eye for this." He thanked them without correcting a single person. Julie stood near the back and watched and told herself it didn't matter because they were a team, and a team didn't need credit divided equally at every turn. In the first year, Harper Home brought in $340,000 in revenue. In the second year, $580,000. By the third year, with 2 additional staff and a wholesale line that Julie had negotiated with 4 regional boutiques, they were clearing just under $1 million annually. Arizona Magazine ran a small feature on the store. The photo they used was of the beautiful interior, the warm light, the stacked copper pots, the long farm table covered in linen. Ralph was not in the photo. He was not in the store when the journalist visited. He had a golf game. Julie was the one who talked to the journalist. Julie was the one who knew the name of every supplier, every product line, every customer who came in more than once. She knew her regulars by name. She remembered what they had bought before. She wrote personal notes on the receipts during the holidays. She hired a young man named Luke Harper, no relation to the store name, just a coincidence that made them both, and she trained him the way you train someone you plan to keep for a long time. She taught him everything. He was loyal in the way that people are loyal when someone has actually invested in them. And through all of it, quietly, carefully, Julie kept her own records. A personal file, not just the business records that lived in the company accounting software. Her own folder. Printed copies of every supplier agreement she had signed, every debt record, every lease document, the original operating license with the business registration number. She kept this at home in a fireproof document box in her home office closet behind a stack of Grace's old school projects. Not because she was planning anything. She wasn't. She kept them because she was a careful woman, and careful women keep records. At the time, she thought that was the only reason. She would later understand it was something else entirely. It was instinct. An instinct, in women like Julie Coleman, is rarely wrong. It started the way these things always start. Small things that you explain away because you love someone, and love makes you want to believe the generous version of events. Ralph started coming home late. Not occasionally, regularly. Tuesday night, sometimes Friday. He started going to the gym at hours that didn't make sense for someone who had never been particularly committed to fitness. He got a second phone. He said it was for work. Gracie was 7 years old, and children see more than adults give them credit for. One evening she came into the kitchen where Julie was reviewing invoices and said, matter-of-factly, the way children deliver bombs. Daddy's friend Edith came to his office today. I saw her picture on his phone. She's really pretty. She was wearing a red dress. Julie set her pen down very carefully on the counter. She looked at her daughter's open, unbothered face. Is she? That's nice, baby. Did you eat your snack? Gracie nodded and wandered off. Julie picked her pen back up and stared at the invoice in front of her for a long time without reading a single word on it. She did not go through Ralph's phone that night. She didn't have to. She was intelligent enough to know that confirmation was not the same as information, and information was what actually mattered. She started paying attention differently. She watched the bank statements more carefully. She noticed 2 dinners at a restaurant in Midtown that she had not been to with Ralph. She noticed a hotel charge in Savannah on a weekend Ralph had told her was a client trip. She filed all of it in her mind and then in a separate section of the document box in her closet. 3 months later, she hired a private investigator, not because she wanted drama, because she wanted facts, clean, documented, court-admissible facts, if it ever came to that. It came to that faster than she expected. The investigator's report arrived on a Thursday. Edith Harper, 31 years old, a real estate agent, very pretty as Gracie had said. The report included dates, locations, photographs taken from a public distance. Nothing intrusive, just enough to be definitive. Julie read the report at her kitchen table on a Thursday morning while Gracie was at school and Ralph was at the store, her store, where he had recently started showing up more regularly, which she had noticed and filed away as interesting. She read every page. Then she closed the folder and she made herself a cup of coffee and she sat quietly for about 20 minutes. And then she called her attorney. Ralph told her on a Sunday evening. Gracie was at her grandmother's for the weekend, which Julie later realized was not a coincidence. He had planned the timing. He sat across from her in their living room in the house that Julie had also largely designed and decorated. And he said the words, I think we both know this hasn't been working for a while. I want a divorce, Julie. I've met someone, and I want to be honest with you about that. He said it like he was being noble, like honesty at this stage of the disaster was a virtue. Julie looked at him, really looked at him. She thought about the fundraiser where they'd met, the sparkling water, the way he'd made her feel back then like she was the most interesting person in the room. Then she said, Okay, Ralph. He blinked. Okay? Yes, okay, we'll need to talk about Gracie's arrangements and the financials. I'll have my attorney reach out to yours this week. He looked unsettled by her calm. Men like Ralph always expect the scene, the tears, the questions, the bargaining. When a woman skips all of that and goes straight to attorneys, it means one of two things. Either she stopped caring a long time ago, or she already has a plan. Ralph didn't know Julie well enough anymore to know which one it was. It was both. He shifted in his seat. About the store, he said carefully. Harper Home is in my name. I want to keep it running. I'll make sure you're compensated fairly. Julie tilted her head slightly. Compensated? Yes, a fair settlement for your contributions. He said the word contributions the way you might describe someone who had helped fold laundry, like it was a small, peripheral thing, like she had assisted rather than created everything that existed. Julie smiled, a small, real smile, not bitter, almost warm. Let's let the attorneys handle it, she said. Ralph nodded, relieved. He had expected a war. What he got was a woman who seemed remarkably at peace. He told himself that meant the process would be smooth, that Julie understood how these things went, that she was being reasonable. He did not understand that her calm was not acceptance, it was preparation. And the preparation had started 3 months ago, the morning she sat at the kitchen table with a private investigator's report and a cup of coffee and 20 minutes of very focused thinking. He would understand it soon enough. Her attorney was a woman named Gracie Clinton, same first name as her daughter, which Julie had always found quietly amusing. Gracie Clinton was 52 years old, originally from Houston, and she had been practicing family and business law in Arizona for 25 years. She was not flashy. She was not warm in the way people mean when they say a person is warm. She was exact, she was thorough, and she did not lose. Julie came to her office on a Tuesday morning with a document box and a printed summary she had prepared herself. She sat both on the conference table and sat down. Gracie Clinton opened the box. She worked through it methodically, putting on reading glasses for the smaller print, making occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. She did not say much for the first 20 minutes. Julie sat across from her and drank the coffee the receptionist had brought and waited. Finally, Gracie Clinton set down her pen and looked across the table. Walk me through how the supplier agreements were structured. I negotiated all of them directly, Julie said. 7 primary suppliers, 3 secondary. The contracts list Coleman Enterprises as the business entity, but I signed them as the authorized operational representative. My signature, my contact details, my personal guarantee on 4 of the larger accounts. And the business operating license? Julie reached into the box and placed a document on the table. The official state of Georgia business operating license for Harper Home, issued to Coleman Enterprises LLC, and on the line marked Registered Operating Manager Julie A. Coleman. He put the business in his name, Julie said, but I registered as the operating manager when we filed because I was the one actually running it. He never paid attention to that line. Gracie Clinton looked at the document for a long time. Then she set it down very carefully, the way you set down something fragile and valuable. Does he know you have this? He doesn't know I kept any of this, Julie said. He assumed I filed things and forgot about them. He never once asked to see the operating document. Not in 4 years. And the lease, I negotiated it. I signed it alongside him as courtesy. Any transfer or assignment requires both signatures. And the line of business credit with Hartwell Financial, my personal credit score was used to qualify. Ralph's wasn't strong enough. I'm the primary guarantor. Gracie Clinton took off her glasses. She folded them and set them on the table, and she looked at Julie Coleman with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was as close to admiration as a woman like Gracie Clinton ever showed in a professional setting. He cannot operate that store, transfer it, or use the credit line without you, she said. Correct, Julie said. He just doesn't know that yet. While Julie was sitting in Gracie Clinton's office with her document box, Ralph Coleman was 3 miles away, showing Edith Harper around Harper Home like it was a gift he was about to place in her hands. Edith was excited. She had ideas. She walked through the store with her phone out, taking pictures, already thinking about what she would change. She wanted to add a lifestyle section, maybe some plants. She thought the color scheme was a little dated. Luke Harper watched her from behind the counter. He had worked for Julie Coleman for 3 years. He knew who had built every square foot of what Edith was currently photographing. He answered her questions politely. He smiled when it was required. And when she disappeared into the back room with Ralph to look at the storage layout, he sent Julie a text that said simply, "She's here. Looks like he's showing her around like it's his to show." Julie replied with 2 words, "I know." Ralph called that evening, confident and casual. "I want to talk about the transition plan for the store. I think we can make this simple. I'll keep Harper and Home running. Edith has some really good ideas for expanding the brand, and I'll set up a monthly payment to you as part of the settlement. We don't need to make this complicated." "Ralph," Julie said, "when does the operating license renew?" A pause. "What? The business operating license? It comes up for annual renewal. Do you know the date?" Another pause. Longer. "Aye, that's handled automatically." "It's not, actually. It requires the registered operating manager's signature and personal attestation." "That's me, Ralph. I'm the registered operating manager. I have been since day one." Silence. "And the Hartwell credit line comes up for annual review in 6 weeks. They'll want confirmation from the primary guarantor that the guarantee is still in effect." "That's also me." She could hear him breathing. "And the lease," she continued, her voice still even, still calm, "requires both co-leases to authorize any transfer. You can check the document. Page 3, Section 4B. My attorney has already reviewed it." When Ralph finally spoke, his voice had changed. The confidence had drained out of it. "Julie, what are you doing?" "I'm not doing anything, Ralph. I'm just telling you how the documents read. Your attorney will explain the rest." She ended the call. She set her phone on the kitchen counter and looked out the window at the backyard where Grace's bicycle was leaning against the fence, and she let herself feel, just for a moment, the full weight of everything. 4 years of building, 2 years of suspecting, 3 months of preparing. And then she exhaled and she poured herself a glass of water and she went to check on her daughter's homework. The meeting happened on a Wednesday morning in Gracie Clinton's conference room on Peachtree Street. Ralph was there with his attorney, a man named Julian Marsh who had a reputation for aggressive negotiation. Gracie Clinton had a reputation for making aggressive negotiators leave the room quieter than they arrived. Ralph walked in looking like himself, pressed suit, controlled expression, working hard to project ease. He glanced at Julie when he sat down, searching her face for something. She gave him nothing. She folded her hands on the table and waited. Julian Marsh opened. He talked about Ralph's foundational role in establishing Coleman Enterprises. He talked about Ralph's vision and leadership. He talked about equitable division and a generous settlement offer for Julie's contributions, there was that word again, and proposed a monthly payment structure and a clean transfer of Harper and Home to Ralph's sole ownership. Gracie Clinton let him finish. She was good at that, letting people use up their energy before she started. Then she opened her own folder and she laid 4 documents on the table, one by one. The operating license, the lease agreement with the co-lessee clause highlighted in yellow, the Hartwell financial credit guarantee bearing Julie's signature and credit profile, and the 7 supplier contracts, each showing Julie as the authorized operational signatory with personal guarantee. Harper and Home cannot operate, renew its license, maintain its lease, access its credit line, or sustain its supplier relationships without my client's active participation. Gracie Clinton said, "Mr. Coleman is named on the LLC formation documents and the business bank account. He is not named on the operational infrastructure that makes the business function. My client built that infrastructure. My client is that infrastructure." Julian Marsh leaned over and spoke quietly into Ralph's ear. Ralph's jaw tightened. He looked at the documents on the table, really looked at them, possibly for the first time, and something moved across his face that was hard to name. It wasn't quite anger. It was something closer to a man realizing he has been standing on a floor that was never actually his, and it is only now, when someone has removed one board, that he can feel the air beneath his feet. She can't just hold the business hostage, Julian Marsh said, his voice carrying a new caution that hadn't been there at the start. She's not holding anything, Gracie Clinton said. She built it. She is simply clarifying what was built and by whom. Mr. Coleman is welcome to the LLC paperwork and the business bank account. My client is requesting full operational transfer, the lease assignment in her name, and primary ownership registration. In exchange, Mr. Coleman receives a cash settlement representing his 4 years of association with the business. We have a number in mind. It is fair. It is generous, actually, given the circumstances. Ralph looked at Julie. He had not spoken directly to her since they sat down. "You planned this," he said quietly. Julie looked back at him steadily. "I kept records, Ralph. You could have done the same. You just never thought you'd need to." He looked away first. The negotiation took the rest of the morning and part of the afternoon. By 3 o'clock, it was done. Ralph Coleman would receive a cash payment of $180,000 from the business account, fair as promised, and would relinquish all operational claim to Harper Home. Julie would assume full ownership. The transfer would be complete within 30 days. Ralph left without saying goodbye. Julian Marsh shook Gracie Clinton's hand with the stiff respect of a man who had arrived certain he would win and was leaving with something more complicated. Gracie Clinton accepted the handshake without any visible satisfaction and went back to her notes. 32 days later, Julie Coleman stood on the sidewalk outside Harper Home at 7 in the morning with a cup of coffee in her hand and watched 2 men from a sign company climb a ladder and take down the old panel above the entrance. Luke Harper stood beside her with his own coffee. He had stayed. Of course he had stayed. She had told him the week after the meeting exactly what was happening, and he had listened, and when she was finished he had said, "What do you need from me?" That was all. That was enough. The old sign came down. The new one went up. It took about 20 minutes. The new sign was the same clean, elegant font, the same warm ivory background with dark letters, but the name was different now. Coleman and Home, not Harper, not Ralph, her name. Her actual name, which had always been on the documents that mattered and was now on the door where everyone could see it. Luke looked up at it. "That's the right name," he said. "It always was," Julie said. She went inside. She did what she did every morning. She turned on the lights, she checked the display near the entrance, she made sure the shelves were full and the products were properly faced. She greeted the 2 part-time staff who arrived at 8. She reviewed the day's expected deliveries. At 3:30, Gracie arrived straight from school, backpack on, sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floor. She stopped just inside the entrance and looked at the store the way she always did, taking it in, comfortable in it, like a place that was hers too because it had always been her mother's. Then she looked at her mother behind the counter. "Mom, the sign outside is different." "It is," Julie said. "It has your name on it." "It does." Gracie processed this for a moment, with the particular seriousness of a 7-year-old encountering something she doesn't fully understand, but knows is important. "Was your name always supposed to be on it?" Julie looked at her daughter, at those clear, steady eyes that had always seen more than people expected. "Yes," she said. "It just took a little while to get there." Gracie nodded, satisfied with this, and dropped her backpack behind the counter and asked if she could have a snack. Julie handed her an apple from the bag she kept in the back, and Gracie wandered off between the shelves, running her small hand lightly along the display tables, the way she had since she was old enough to walk through the store without knocking things over. Julie watched her for a moment. Then she turned back to the counter. There were invoices to review, a new supplier call at 4, a regional buyer coming in Thursday morning who had reached out after seeing the Arizona magazine piece and wanted to discuss a wholesale arrangement. The store was hers. every document, every shelf, every supplier relationship, every carefully maintained record, all of it hers, not because a judge had given it to her, not because she had fought the loudest or cried the hardest or made the most noise, because she had built it. And she had been smart enough and careful enough and patient enough to keep proof. Some people spend their whole lives waiting to be given credit for what they've built. Julie Coleman decided a long time ago to just make sure the paperwork was in order instead. Turns out that works a lot better. She picked up her pen and got back to work. And that brings us to the end of today's story. If there is one thing we can learn from Julie, is that keeping your receipts is sometimes more important than winning an argument. Now, I would love to hear from you. What did you think was Ralph's biggest mistake? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next one.